Hi, everyone out there. You are watching OBN Horn of Africa. This is Future Africa show. In this edition, we are going to talk about African affairs, African-related issues, African matters, pan-Africanism, and we preach African-related stuffs in this episode. Africa is not at ease spiritually, economically, politically, and psychologically this time around, right? Africa should unite and bring a continental solidarity. I'm joined by a pan-Africanist, staunch pan-Africanist, an author and community development strategist from South Africa. Actually, he is originally from Democratic Republic of Congo. And his name is Kabala John. Thank you for joining me, sir.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, I tried to go through the agenda very quickly, and I need to stress on what I said a while ago. Africa is not at ease spiritually, economically, politically, and psychologically, and you name it, right? And what has to be done to have a common identity as an African? And what has to be done to implement what Asian tigers did in the continent Asia?
Thank you so much. All the problems of Africa today, we can trace them from the origin of the current state of Africa. One thing that has to be emphasized is that African people were there before European came. However, the current geography of Africa is something that none of us as African people is the originator of. In other words, none of us is the creator of the things that we call today, the concepts that we are calling today countries. And these countries were not created by us, and they were not created for the peace or development of African people. They were created under the profile of corporates in order to build the Western world, in order to be the corporates that produce the resources that the Western world need for its own development, and not for development of African people. That's the reason why Africa has got all the conditions that we know in the Africa today, the conditions that we have just outlined some time ago. All these realities that we know about Africa are born out of this, the genesis actually of the current African countries. And we also support this system in a way that we are continuing to support the invention of imperialists. We should be obviously thinking about recreating the whole African paradigm or African dynamics, so to say, a new dynamics, a new paradigm, which is congruent to our reality and our culture, as long as we are still trying to function in the guidelines defined by the imperialists. We will have to face all the problems that we are facing currently, and nothing will change. Thank you.
Still, Africa is under colony, and there is neocolonialism, the new feature of the original colonization trend, you see. Can we really say Africa is independent from colonization these days?
No, we cannot say that. We can maybe say that in papers, but in reality, we cannot say, if we are honest to ourselves, we cannot say that Africa is independent. And mostly if we know actually what is the meaning of the word independence, or what an independent person or entity has to be, or has to function, we cannot ascertain that Africa is independent for a couple of reasons. One is that independence or freedom is something that cannot be negotiated for, is something that cannot be given, is something that has to be fought for. You cannot become free by negotiating with those who have put you down. We can only become free by fighting and gaining your freedom by all means necessary. So as far as I'm concerned, or Africa is concerned, with what we call the African independence that we believe that we obtained in the late 1960s, which was given on the plate. It wasn't independence. It was maybe just a change of strategy. That is why we are still talking today about neocolonialism. You remember, we were in colonialism, and now we're talking about neocolonialism, which means the names or the brand can change, but the strategy is still the same. One thing has to be understood here. Africa is always and still the richest, is the richest land in the world. And Africa has things that many people want and they cannot do without, and they've never wanted to pay for. Therefore, they will always find an excuse to invade Africa. And I'm quoting the ancestor John Henry Clark, based on this statement that we are still holding something that the world needs, but the world cannot afford to pay, and they've never wanted to pay. We will always find ourselves as subjects to other people's oppression and other people's subjections. Therefore, we cannot talk about independence while we are weak, depending on the very same people that we have asked to be independent from. We are depending on them to, for example, to provide the vaccine when we are in a situation such as the pandemic, as we are going through right now. We cannot talk about being independent while we are still obviously depending on the external forces or on the aliens to provide the foods that we need in order to provide to our basic needs. We cannot talk about independence while we are still being educated by them, while we are still carrying their names, while we are still carrying their religions, while we are still even, using the so-called laws or institutions. We cannot talk about independence. We have to be very serious and look at ourselves in the face and to realize that we are not independent people, and begin to do for ourselves what other people have pretended to do for us. And therefore, we can maybe begin by talking, we can begin to talk about independence, or we are not independent. Thank you.
Arguably, Africa is the genesis of everything, the genesis of civilization, the genesis of mankind, but still it's lagged behind, right? Last from the bottom list.
Well, one thing I believe is fundamental to the stagnation of Africa is Africans themselves. It's true that we have opposition forces that are preventing Africa from emerging, but we have to realize that Africans themselves, they are also a big problem to their own growth and their own development, because a civilization cannot be destroyed from outside unless it has been compromised from the inside. And one fundamental reason that I believe that Africa is stagnant at this moment is because African people, in our sake or in our struggle for change, for liberation, for development, we want to make ourselves a copycat or the copycats of those who enslaved us. Let me restate myself. We always, when we talk about development, we want to make ourselves or turn ourselves into little British, into little French or little Portuguese, according to who colonized us. And in other words, we want to imitate, and you cannot be better, you cannot become better than the person or the people you are imitating, because your place will be a second place behind them. That's a reality of African people as we're speaking right now. From the moment that you begin to imagine that for you to be better in life, you must be like other people, you are becoming automatically a psychological prisoner of the people you want to imitate. Whether they can build a jail for you or not, your psychological jail is the most important jail that one can find himself in. And the second reason that Africa is stagnant at this moment is because all our projects for development that we have in Africa are based on ambition, but not on the vision. For people to develop truly, they must come up with a distinctive vision, which is obviously congruent to their environment, their culture, and their reality. But what happens in Africa is that we do things because of ambition. That means we come up with the development projects that are based on our ambition to become like China, our ambition to become like US, our ambition to become like France, but not really a global scale vision which defines us as African people. For example, look at China. When Chinese people or governments sit down to come up with the projects, they develop a global scale projects. In other words, they project the vision of the world for the next 20, for the next 50 years. They want to become the superpower of the world. So the question is, what really is the vision of Africa as we're speaking right now? And what is the scale of that vision of Africa as we're speaking right now? If it's not to imitate France, if we were French colony, or to imitate England, if we were Britain colony, that is what is existing today. And we feel proud by being part of other people's institutions, rather than obviously coming up with our own vision of the world and begin to create from scratch what we have to create and what can make us as Africa, as a distinctive entity from other people of the world. The fundamental reason now is this: Africa is aiming for things, but not for power. In this world, everything is around power. If you have power, you can dictate your future, you can dictate your destiny, you can decide over what kind of reality, has to govern your life. But if you don't have the power, you and your entire reality will be governed by other people. And this situation of Africa is powerlessness. And for Africa to live from this state of stagnation, we must aim for power. And Africa has to aim in order to become the global power base. And that is what we do in my organization, the African Continental Unity Party. Our vision is to rebuild the African global power base, because without the power, we cannot protect ourselves. Without the power, we cannot feed ourselves. Without the power, we cannot even educate ourselves. And we will continue as powerless as we are. We'll continue to be that entity that Thomas Sankara said, that we consume what we don't produce and we produce what we don't consume. And therefore, for Africa to move from this state of stagnation, we must be able to eager to aim for power, because the power will be all that we need. At this moment, as African people, we are not supposed to pray for food because we have the land. As you know, 60% of arable land in the world is in Africa. We cannot pray for food because we have the land, we have the water, and we have the sun. Three components that are very important for the food production. We cannot pray for wealth because we have all these natural resources from which wealth is created. We cannot pray for money because money is artificial entity that is being created by people, which can be changed also by people. One thing that we need to pray or to eager for is the power to change our resources in the tools, in the things that we need for our daily basis survival. And the power actually to dictate what is the future of Africa and the future of our children has to be. And when we get the power, we won't be worried about stagnation. Thank you.
How long would African people live with the blessing of the United States of America and other Western countries?
As long as Africans are reluctant to act for themselves and to do for themselves what other people have pretended to do for them. This situation can change today, it can change tomorrow, and it may not even change, because it all depends on what African people understand generally and what they decide to do commonly or collectively. When I see Africa today, we are still trying to find solutions to what we think is our own particular problem. If we are from Zambia, we want to find the problem to Zambia because we think our problem is obviously unique to our own reality, Zambian people. If we are from Angola, we want to find a solution to our Angolan problem. If we are from Ethiopia, we want to find solution to what we think is our Ethiopian problem. And we have tried this. We have been trying this individual solutions for about 60 years now, since the time of post-independence. And these solutions seem to be not working simply because there is no Congolese solution, there is no Ethiopian solution, there is no Somalian solution, there is no Nigerian solution. There is only one solution, which is African solution. Unless African begins to address the African solution, the situation of African people will never going to change. We will still going to be under the hegemony of America, under the hegemony of France and Britain, because we are trying to find the individual solutions to what we think is our common problem, which in reality, there is no collective, what we think is an individual problem. In reality, there is no individual problem, there's only collective problem. And that problem is called the white supremacy, which has to be approached collectively as African people, as we find ourselves as the subject of white supremacy. One thing has to be understood here. Since we have been trying individual solutions for more than 60 years, it may as well suggest that there's no individual future to what we think is individual country. In other words, there's no individual future for Angola, for Congo, for Nigeria, for Ghana. There's only one future, which is African future. So for Africa to leave the hegemonic power of America, of France, of Britain, Africa must unite. African people must begin to look for the African solution instead of individual solution, because there's no individual solution and there's no individual future. There's only collective solution that we have to find collectively. That is the reality, and that is the change that we want in Africa.
Okay, good job. Westerners, label Africa with negative adjectives such as savagehood, illiteracy, ignorance, malnutrition, unemployment, RAS, you can name it, right? How should Africans cooperate to halt this bad name and to bring a new paradigm shift?
Well, let's start firstly with the savages. It's a kind of a brand which was attached to Africa for a long time ago, which in some way somehow justified the ill treatment that African people received under the conditions of slavery and condition of colonialism, and we still obviously experience the same treatments under the current condition of neocolonialism. For a people who want to destroy other people, they must first of all begin by creating a narrative that will now be grasped by the majority of the people, so that by that narrative, any action that will be implemented against those people who have been stereotyped can be justified, because there's already a narrative that is being created. For example, if you brand a particular community as cruel, as a criminal, it's going to be easier for police to gun them down, because the narrative, the public narrative in the mainstream is that that particular community is a criminal. Therefore, when they kill them, they kill criminals. They don't kill human beings, especially when that kind of narrative has been propagated among the population. So let's go back now to the term savages, which was attached to the African people. Let's try to analyze that a little bit to see really if we are savages, or if those who created that term were savages. When you go back in the history, you are trying to study the history of European people, which is the best way to understand who they are, because we don't have to consider people for what they say they are. We need to consider people for truly who they are. And the right way to understand who people are, or what people are actually, is to question their history. And now when we question the European history, we see that these are the people that sometimes in the history, they are considered women as a subject or as an object, not as equal human being as they were. That's one example. And as time evolved, we see them now, they are the ones who are pushing the rights of women, the equality of women. Secondly, they are the ones who considered African people as slaves, as savages, as degeneration or something like that, which is not equal to the human being, which is a substance between animals and a human being. They considered us, and that kind of consideration justified the transatlantic slave trade and all kind of predicament that we have gone through as African people. And themselves, again, European people, as time evolved, or actually as they evolved, they began to change the narrative and look at those treatments that were inflicted upon us as a kind of illegal treatments. And they are the ones who came up with what we call the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, even though we had that kind of Universal Declaration of Human Rights a long time ago, which they didn't consider. So this is a situation I'm trying to paint out. This is a picture I'm trying to paint out here. European have come from a space where they had a kind of perception over African people, or over other people who were non-European. And as time evolved, or actually as themselves evolved, they started to change that narrative or that perception in order to accept other people as human, as equally as themselves. What does it mean? It means that European themselves are the ones who have come from a state of subhuman, a state of savages, of savage, in order to become to the state of human beings, where as they gain the understanding of human beings, they also gain the understanding of what is humanity. That is why we see today the European are pushing the narrative about human rights, women's rights, all these things that they didn't defend in the past. While in the past, us as African people, we stood for human rights. We stood for the right of women. We didn't have a god unless we had a goddess. We worshipped women. We had a higher place for women in our society, which it was impossible in a European paradigm. Let me give you one example. When you go into a Catholic Church, they apparently worship women, but they have never given one single woman a chance to become a pope. All the popes are male, which means these are the people who look at a woman realistically as an equal to themselves, and they are now evolving. So don't be surprised in the future if you happen to have a pope. It's simply because European are growing up and are getting the humanity in themselves, and they are now beginning to look at other people as equal as themselves. That is a reality. That's reality. And in order to understand this nicely, look at a household where you have a baby is small, is growing. The baby will be excited about the house, about the rooms in the house, about the things that you have in the house. But you as a parent, you are not excited about those things because you know those things are there a long time ago and you bought those things. But the baby, when he discovers those things, he's excited about them. He breaks other things, he jumps on other things, he appropriates himself with some of the things. That's the reality of European people. Those are the ones who have gone all over the world trying to discover the minerals. Those are the ones who have created the conditions that we call today the climate conditions, which is making the earth, a place which is going to be which is going to be unbearable for human to live, simply because they were rushing in the discoveries that they have discovered, because they just got here yesterday. They were discovering, they were excited, and they created a lot of chaos in the world. They destroyed civilization, they've destroyed the nature, and now today they are pushing about environmental degradation, and they're pushing people to be conscious about the environment and the environmental degradation, things that we knew long time before European came out of the caves, wore shoes, and lived in a house that has a window. Before, in Africa, you couldn't chop down a tree before you make a prayer to that tree, because we knew that we are part of the environment. And that is something that Europeans are discovering today. So the question is, who really is a savage? Who is actually coming from the condition of savagery to become a human being between us and European? Because they are turning now to do what we did in the past, which they didn't want to do. They are now trying to push it now. I leave that to you to answer. Who is savage between us and Europeans? So to answer to your question, how we should handle this, we must educate African people about consciousness, about obviously, how can I put it? We must educate African people about self-awareness. People have to have the knowledge of themselves, the knowledge of the history of where they come from, their origin, and the true power of themselves as African people. And people have to be educated to understand that we are the only people who are in line with the nature. The sun is in line with us. The nature, the environment, everything seems to be created for us as a Black people. And when people are fully aware of themselves and of the potential in them, they cannot really disregard themselves because they are being called the names such as Negro or whatever else name that can be called. We cannot disregard ourselves because we are called people of the third world, because we know fully the potential that we have as African people, and we are fully educated, and we will be working according to that principle rather than from what people are calling us as names.
All right, okay. Westerners again grant you or grant aid for Africans and manipulate the way they want to be. It is America or other Western countries who allow the government to do and don't. You know what I mean? We can take the Ethiopian case, for instance. After Prime Minister Abiy came to power, he had done a lot of initiatives and implemented so many reforms. But the Westerners are not willing to permit him to move forward. You know what I mean? They did aid cut on some staff, still trying to manipulate his leadership, but he is resisting and promoting homegrown economy strategy and working on African solidarity to resist and halt the ever-existed manipulation of the Westerners. What do you say about it, and what do you know about the case that is revolving in Ethiopia?
Well, I'm somehow familiar to the situation in Ethiopia as much as I'm familiar to the situation in the whole continent of Africa, because as far as Africa is concerned, there is no difference between what is happening in Congo, in Nigeria, in Ethiopia, or in Ghana. The reason is that the agenda of European people over Africa is always the same. It's that of domination, oppression, and exploitation. So whether it's Ethiopia, whether it's Nigeria, okay, whatever the case, it doesn't make any difference. And I'm kind of in support with the Prime Minister of Ethiopia for his good works and resistance that he has been putting in place against the hegemony of imperialism. However, it is not a wise decision to resist alone. It is not a wise decision to resist alone, because the history repeats itself, especially when we don't learn from the history. You know, I wouldn't be teaching you or informing you about anything new if I'm talking about Thomas Sankara, who was shut down by European powers because he tried to resist. I couldn't talk even about Patrice Lumumba. I can't even talk about the late president of Tanzania, who just died mysteriously. I cannot talk about even the president of Haiti, Black nation in South America. All these cases that we know of presidents that are being gunned down because they tried to resist. It's simply because we are trying to handle a collective matter individually. This is something that if we are truly about, we are truly honest and truly, how can I put it, honest and credible about our endeavors to change Africa, we must change the system, the operating system that we are using to approach our different realities. For example, we have through this recent history and the people that you and I know that have been killed by trying to defend the African nations or countries, or by trying to obviously protect the interests of the individual nations. Why can't we come up with a system that puts the vision in front instead of individuals, because it's easier for you to kill a visionary. I mean, it's easier for you to kill a leader, but it's not, if that leader actually is a person, but it's not easy for you to kill a vision, you know, because whatever you kill the vision is like the cause of the problem. Whatever you kill the person that carries that vision or that carries that cause, you are not eliminating the vision, because as long as the problem is still there, other people will rise for the same cause, and it's going to be impossible for you to eliminate all of them. So what I'm trying to say is this: African leaders must find a way to create a structure, a continental structure, through which our political effort to change Africa will be channeled. And that, in this case, it will be impossible, or it will be difficult to prevent us from emerging by attacking one single leader. But because whenever a single leader is taken down, there's a structure, a continental structure is there, which has been put in place, through which any people from any walks of life from any corner of Africa will be joining in order to get the work done, and Africa will be moving forward. That's what I can say.
I'm really grateful for your time, and thank you for making time to give us this valuable interview. Mr. Kabala John, a staunch advocate of Pan-African agenda. Thank you for your time. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Dear viewers, thank you for watching. This brings you the end of our edition for today. Have a good one. Bye-bye. Take care.